you're moving from place to place, place. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. In this segment, we have on set with us Max James, former assemblyman within the Tobago House of Assembly. And this morning, we're speaking from Audiogate to Roxborough Fallout. All right, good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, Julian. What a topic.
Yes. So we dive straight in. There has been another audio tape which has surfaced. I think, well, by now we're at number 3. We started with the first one, including the chief secretary. The second being the videos that would have been revealed in the house by the whistleblower. Now we have an audio of the whistleblower giving some indications. And then most recently, I'm not sure if you were able to catch it last night, we had the appearance of the whistleblower, Akil Abdullah, giving his perspective on our show there last night with Skippy. What's your thoughts on where all of this appears to be heading? Where do you see it heading?
Well, good morning to the viewers. It seems to me to be headed into nothingness. In the first place, any whistleblower is supposed to be very factual. Any whistleblower is supposed to be very truthful and to come across as very reliable. And I am very worried at this stage that we have nothing from Mr. Abdullah, I think it is, Akil. And it doesn't appear that we can go any further with any testimony that, or any so-called evidence that he may muster. In my opinion, he's chosen to be very unreliable, and hence I described the whole thing as headed into nothingness. We're not going to get anywhere with this. And I think that the Assembly, the Chief Secretary and his team should focus, ignore all these distractions and focus on the governance of Tobago. Because you see, Julian, at the launch, in fact, the launch had barely ended for the night, and you saw a frontal attack by Mr. Dennis. As soon as the launch had ended, he put out a statement. So you see, it's going to be a relentless attack on the executive here in Tobago, from the PNM leader here in Tobago, from the Prime Minister, organs of the state, and so forth. They lost an election in Trinidad, yet they claim victory. Because if you couldn't move from 7-7 to at least 8-6, then I wager that you lost, because you have all the arms of state, you have vast resources, and you have the bully pulpit, you have the chair, and you couldn't move from where you were to a position of increased, a majority of the seats in the local government system. And therefore, the PNM is desperate. They are looking down defeat in 2025, both at the general elections and the Tobago House of Assembly elections not too soon after that, should things go well as the law says, barring any unexpected surprises. So it doesn't look good for the PNM. They believe that they have to protect their friends out there, their contractor friends. So we have to look out for more anarchy in Tobago and in the country as a whole. It doesn't look good for the country. And they're obsessed with power. They have their interests to protect. And therefore, we have to expect this kind of onslaught against the chief secretary here. And they're going to use anything to regain power. But I suspect life is very cyclical. And I suspect that they understand that. But I think that they're pushing against the pricks. And I don't think that they're going to succeed. Once the chief secretary and his executive remain focused doing the job that they've been elected to do.
Do you see any implications with the launch of the new political party and the issue being raised by the Tobago Council of the People's National Movement in relation to, once again, you saw part of the immediate reaction was the fact that the people of Tobago did not elect the TPP to office. You see any implications with that going forward, or you see the new party taking full stride in terms of its effort to really capture the hearts and minds of Tobago?
Well, I think that they've already captured the hearts and minds of Tobagonians. An acronym has nothing to do with governance. So on that question, I think they've already, and they are capturing more hearts and minds. They're capturing more young people. When you look across the political sphere here in Tobago, you are seeing where even P&M stalwarts are now migrating to the TPP because they understand now that the Chief Secretary is governing. Lots of things are being done that took 20 years to be done. And I think people are moving from uncertainty to certainty. There are no other implications except that, well, you'll have a continuation of what they'll try to have a continuation of what we saw recently with the licensing officers from Tobago. But I think even that will be, I like to use this word, even that will be stopped, because of actions that, the strategic actions that are, in fact, announced by the Secretary of Infrastructure. I'll tell you in my own case, when I was a secretary, Labour Secretary, Minister Partap sent one of his operatives here at my office. So I asked, who is this young man? How did he arrive here? You send in someone from Trinidad. My administrator doesn't know. I don't know. The minister did not confer with me. The permanent secretary at that time, Mr. Macshine, did not confer with me. I went downstairs personally. Young man, please take your things and leave. Don't let me come back here in 5 minutes and you're still here. In our days, we weren't joking. And he took his things and he left because he would have been evicted. The law says that we have control over certain things here. I pay rent for this particular building. The law says that we own these things in Tobago. And if you want to send somebody from Tobago and believe you can usurp me, then you were heading up the wrong tree, you're backing up the wrong tree. So I think the secretaries have to be very firm. The chief secretary has to be very firm. They have to begin to understand more than ever, that we control these things under the law. And they must move forward with fortitude, with confidence, knowing that they have the power of the law behind them, and they must act. No more should anyone from Trinidad, the Prime Minister, write down, do or undertake any action to usurp the functions of the Assembly. I had a discussion with a reporter yesterday, and he was saying to me, well, you know, Shamfo Kojo is launching some sport issue, some sport thing. So I said, that's crazy. That couldn't happen, beg your pardon, that could never happen underneath us. Which have been going on for years. It went on under the PNM. Because if she succeeds, and I want to tell Mr. Bain, Secretary Bain, that he should stop that. The facilities belong to the Executive Council for the time being. They're in control of it. And no minister could come here and make a launch here without the cooperation and agreement of the secretaries. Because you could say this Minister of Health could come and launch his own program here too. And all the ministries can come here and make a launch and carry out activities here. No. So Shamfo Kojo must be stopped. Because if you use the argument, it has been done before. In law, there's something called condonation. So if you continue to condone any particular activity or any particular set of activities, then you're saying that I have now divested myself of my role and responsibility in Tobago and given it to Shamfo Kojo or any other minister. And therefore, that must be stopped immediately.
How do you respond? And that takes us automatically to the position taken by the new political party, the TPP, that would have been launched, where there's a position of we are at war. How do you see that working for the island of Tobago, particularly at this time?
Well, we have Tobago Tobagonians and Tobago and the various, like, except perhaps even to the period of 2001 to 2022, they're about 21. 21. Tobagonians have always been at war. From the onset or from the outset, Tobagonians have always been at war. They never wanted self-governance for Tobago. They never wanted autonomy for Tobago. It was given under perhaps the principles of the United Nations under duress. But Robinson and Murray framed the argument properly, and they had no other option than to relent. So it is not a new thing. The Deputy Chief Secretary would have resurrected the argument in that particular way, a very fine argument that she made, and to remind all of us that indeed the war continues. So it is managing the best that we could under or within chaos. And there's where it is for the foreseeable future until the executive, in terms of their strategy, decide to take what is ours.
All right. All right, viewers, we take a quick break. We'll be back with Max James. We just want to remind you that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live.
Good morning, good morning, morning.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. We continue this interview this morning with Max James, former assemblyman of the Tobago House of Assembly. And just before we went to the break, you were speaking to the scenario in relation to Minister Cudjoe. And one of our viewers would have made an interesting point on the live, indicating that do not forget that she's also the Member of Parliament for Tobago West, and certainly can bring projects and programs to benefit her constituents and the island at large. Before we move on to the Roxborough matter, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the commentator is wrong, and it speaks to the whole question of where Trinidadians don't understand the powers of the Tobago House of Assembly and the powers enshrined therein under Act Number 40, 1996. Even if the minister is the Minister of Sport, and even if she's represented for Tobago West, the fact remains, for all things administrative, all things under the purview of the Secretary must be conducted through the Secretary or in conjunction with the Secretary. Remember, the law says all those sporting facilities, all those activities of sport belong in the domain of the Assembly and the domain specifically of a particular secretary. And therefore, she cannot just enter into a facility under the authority of the Assembly and carry out a particular function. And therein lies the problem, the conundrum in terms of how this law is prosecuted. Because you're going to have all those kinds of conflicts. And the minister, having the backing of this prime minister, will try to continue to insert themselves in the domain of the Assembly, and that must be stopped. I suspect when this chief secretary goes out with his team, he needs to take up this particular point and deal with it once and for all. If you want to use the facilities belonging to the Tobago House of Assembly under the law, then you must have my permission. Otherwise, they could be evicted. The chief secretary is on record that he has been too nice, and the time for niceness is over. Ministers must know their place, just as how we know our place and are fighting for our space here in Tobago. And they must take up their figuratively, arms, political arms, figuratively. I don't want them to arrest me when I go outside. and ensure that we perform within our space without hindrance. And I think the government is attempting to hinder the work of the Tobago Assembly.
All right, we want to move on to the next area very quickly. We saw a scenario where the local government elections took place. Watson Duke, who would have been very focused in terms of putting forward and pushing there and vying, and openly expressed his interest in becoming mayor. of Port of Spain. That dream did not come true because he would have been able to accumulate only just over about 1,200 votes, not necessarily being able to secure a seat in the corporation. And therefore, the question, or the PDP rather, not being able to secure a seat in the corporation. Immediately, we saw that within the same week, that once again the focus returns to Tobago. How do you see that working for his constituents of Roxborough and the people of Tobago? Would you say that Watson will continue to enjoy the same level of confidence? You think that he's not likely to?
Well, it is not a question of not likely to the Julian. He's already lost it. In the first place, the people of Roxborough, Belgarden, De La Ford, and environs voted for him to perform for them 4 years. He wanted ostensibly to be the chief secretary and just have Mr. Augustine as a charlatan there, as a figurehead. He wanted to call the shots, only because he had the party belonged to him. He never got the permission, and they would not have given him that in any case. He never got the permission of his constituents to go to Trinidad to become a mayor. We already voted for you. We told you what we wanted you to do. And therefore, the fact that he left his constituents to go to find glory in a foreign land, tells you the mentality of the individual. So he is absolutely discredited. Just before, it was about 2 months ago, thereabout, he came to Roxborough. He walked the length and breadth of his constituency. And he was almost ejected, if you wish to say. He was pilloried by his constituents. They do not want him, except maybe his family members and a few diehard supporters. You will always get that. But he's of no consequence. I think he's an absolute idiot. And I think he only has nuisance value. Because he divested himself, ostensibly he divested himself of his responsibility to his constituents. How can you come back and say you leave a woman or you leave a man and say, darling, and come back again? You go on looking for another woman elsewhere, or another man elsewhere, opportunity elsewhere. And when you didn't gain it, you come back and say, take me back, I'm sorry. Mr. Duke has proven that he has no loyalty to anybody. His life, we all make mistakes and we have had our story and our problems. And that is going to attend us at times. But on a very simple matter of representing his people, he showed that to the nation and to the world that he's prepared to leave his constituents, to hang them out to dry. And then coming back to Tobago and say, I'm a representative, when you showed that your loyalty was really power elsewhere, and then you didn't get it, and you're coming back here to make more of a fool of yourself. I think he's supposed to be disregarded.
How do you respond to the argument where he has put forward the position in the past that in order to get the kind of change we want, we need to have that representation?
You mean a mayor in Port of Spain will give us that?
Well, we need to have that representation in Trinidad. He has now tied the concern, as it is now, to indicate that when we speak to the issue of the reforming of the Tobago House of Assembly Act and autonomy and so on, that there's the need for Trinidad and Tobago to work together, those in Trinidad and those in Tobago, a position which previously Mr. Duke might have spoken more strongly about the fact that Tobago has to lead its way in terms of determining what we want. Do you buy that argument that perhaps the mayor of Port of Spain could have contributed in some way, form or fashion to getting to that point where Tobago needs to have some representation in Trinidad?
Nonsense, pure stupidity of that man. How can a mayor, becoming the mayor of Port of Spain, give you power and so on to better Tobago's cause? He was given the position of Deputy Chief Secretary and given the responsibility to set up a seat, a desk, an office, an institution in Port of Spain to deal with the Tobago diaspora, to deal with ministers and persons of importance, banks and insurance companies and investors and so forth. He left it. Had that thing been properly set up, it would have positioned Tobago and the assembly to prosecute its responsibility to Tobagonians. It's like Satan, you know. God put Satan here on earth. He said, fix up this earth. He said, I'll descend into the heavens, and he tried to overthrow God, you know. Duke was given the responsibility to go to Port of Spain to hopefully, I suspect he might have been effective in it, all things necessary for Tobago by setting up a Tobago desk, a Tobago office. And he eschewed it. He left it. He scorned it and said, this is not for me. Just like Satan said, I don't want this earth. I go back to heaven where I came from. And he left it and said, listen, I go in and fight for mayor. That is a better opportunity. I think he's obsessed with power. I think he doesn't understand what his role is. And I think that he's essentially a political nobody at this stage. He's finished.
All right. Well, we got to leave it there for this morning, but certainly this conversation will be continuing as we go into the next few months and few years. I feel like we are on that full speed ahead. The campaign trail to elections 2025. All right. So thank you very much again, Max James, former Assemblyman for the Tobago House of Assembly, joining us here on set this morning to share his perspective. Welcome. All right, viewers, and as we prepare to head on out to the break, we want to remind you that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live.